Howdy, folks. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're gonna have a lot of fun today. It's a Friday in 2021. This is like a real thing. I'm sitting here. I'm like, is it really 12? Like, do I hit the live button now? And Mike knows what I'm talking about. And let me introduce here my good friend Mike Pullan, who's a senior creative producer at Leviathan.
Hey, everybody.
Fantastic company. Love collaborating with them. And we're gonna talk. Today's a special treat. We're gonna open the curtain a little bit, because I think in our industry we have these little sub factions. We have the developers versus the creative, versus the producers versus the comptroller who's got to like pay it out. And the reality is we're all working together on the same thing at the end of the day. And the more we kind of understand each other's roles and workflows and kind of what we're all after, I think this just makes life a lot easier for everybody. So with that in mind, I have my good friend Mike here. And Mike, say hello if you want to give a quick little introduction about yourself, just at a high level. We'll talk about some of the fun specifics as we kind of get discussing. But if you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on here, Elbers. My name is Mike Pullan, like you said. I'm a senior creative producer at Leviathan. Just like my background, my past, I have been in the industry probably working close to a decade, maybe somewhere between 8 and 10 years. Originally coming from a strong VFX background, commercial post-production, before moving into sort of the experiential realm that I'm working in now. Originally, I come from right outside Atlantic City, New Jersey. Shout out to Atlantic City. Yeah. Nice. Moved to New York when I was, 18, 19 years old, to work as a comedian.
No way.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true that everything you see from me, Elbers, it's all, the foundation of it is my improv work, my comedy work, and
that's why we get along.
I guess.
That's why we get along.
I think so.
Yeah.
I will say, Elbers, from the moment I met you, I knew that you and I were going to get along famously.
Yeah.
I felt it. I felt a connection to you, and I'm so happy to be here and to be chatting with you about this. But yeah, man, I was working as a comedian for a long time, maybe like 5 years doing. And when I say, let me actually caveat that. When I say that I was working as a comedian, what I really mean was I was working a cash register somewhere and doing a lot of comedy. I wasn't making a ton of money. So in the interest of sort of developing my career a bit, I took a job working as a runner at a post-production house, and just sort of decided that like now's the time in my life that I want to make a career. Decided that I wanted to work as hard as I could, work my way up the ranks, and like I said, it's been close to 8, 10 years, whatever it's been, and here I am. Different city, different companies, but same guy.
And I think that's a struggle I think a lot of folks will really be able to connect with, just that idea of like, coming up in an art industry. I think all of us have been at some point in that kind of slog of kind of have some job on the side that's keeping the bills paid, and then we're trying to get our hustle on the side. And I think we'll come back especially to the background of improv and to the VFX side of things that you were involved with a lot. I am just trying to make sure my chat here works, because folks, hey, listen, this is a conversation, not just a this way conversation. Wait, no, this other side. This is like for the rest of my life, I'll always be pointing in the wrong direction on the screen. It's not just a conversation this way. No, hold on, you gotta go the other side.
Oh, I have to go to the other side. Yeah, this is my first time. No,
it's not a conversation just this way. There's also a conversation this way. And at the end of the day, we're always trying to make sure that community can continue growing, continue learning stuff. So by all means, I see y'all in the chat. If you have questions, put them in the chat. This will divert. We have a couple questions. We don't have a 5 minute like NASA schedule here. So if you got like a good take and you put it in there, we'll run with it. And I do see all the YouTube chats coming in. I see Twitch is working now. Grady, I see you, my friend. Alex, Tom, David's here. Dr. Mojo, extra spicy, please. That is music to my ears. Everyone, Adrian's here. Thanks for everybody for joining us. We're gonna have a fun time today. And here's the problem. Adrian says, so you're a comedian, eh? Tell us a joke then. But I don't know if he's talking about me or you. Well, that's the trick. That's going to be the problem we're going to have in our relationship. is when someone says comedian, neither of us will know which one they're talking about.
Well, maybe there's like a way that we could both do this at the same time. Do you want me to like give you a setup and you tell me the punchline? How do we double team this?
Okay, yeah, we'll do one because I think it's gonna be cringe, but we'll do one.
I think I'm gonna be cringe. I think
we'll do one and then we'll get into it.
So one of my favorite jokes to tell people, and it's an easy one, is why did the Scarecrow win an award?
Because he's pure thug, bro. That's what.
Because he's pure thug, bro. Yeah.
That's what he do. That's what he do.
So why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Huh? Pretty good? Pretty good? I know that's a terrible joke, but...
the only thing that tops that is a Bluetooth banana phone, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, I'll talk to y'all about this later. I didn't have the time to like plug it in and like don't worry. Where's the banana? Emery even asked, "Where's the banana phone?" Here's the banana phone. I know. We'll come back to the banana phone situation. Lots of claps in the chat. Thanks all. Let's get this love flowing here. So I think a good place to start off, Mike, is probably the easiest place, and that is kind of this big question that I think a lot of people think they have an answer to, but I don't know if they really like kind of get it behind the scenes, which is like, what does it mean to be a producer? And building on top of that, what does your day look like?
Oh my God, what a great question. To be honest, I think everybody, even though it might seem like nobody has a good answer to that, everybody's kind of right. A producer wears a lot of different hats on a project, whether it's building schedules, keeping budgets, keeping people motivated. I joke sometimes part of that is being a therapist for the people on the team. There is, in my mind anyway, and I think everybody's probably going to give you a different answer on this, there is no limit to the number of hats that a producer wears on a project. But the most important thing to me has always been about keeping the team focused, keeping the team motivated, and keeping everybody sort of engaged in the work that we're doing. Everything else, can be figured out along the way. We can work on the schedule, we can work on the budget, but let's all make sure that we're all on the same page about what we're looking to accomplish here overall, and make sure everybody's like I said, engaged in the project.
I think that's the most truth I've heard, because I feel like some days you're probably, and a lot of producers I know, like, some days they're the taskmaster, right? It's just hounding people like, hey, did you do the thing you said you were going to do?
Right.
I feel like some days you're dealing like client-facing kind of things and kind of just figuring out what the client wants. Some days you're doing internal, like, to your point, making sure everyone's engaged in the project, doesn't have any roadblocks. The therapist part, I think, is a good one. I think that one's all too real.
It's very real.
Sometimes you're off-site, sometimes you're on-site. Like, it seems like a really flexible role that a lot of people don't see as flexible.
Yeah. If there was one word that I had to put on it, or one like trait that I felt like would be important for a producer, it really is that versatility, that ability to jump in and be whatever the day calls for, like you're saying, whether it's the taskmaster, whether it's being a client-facing person. And truthfully, when I say keeping the entire team engaged, I mean not just the internal team that you're working with, but like the wider team, the clients. Like, let's make sure everybody's still on the same page and working towards the same goals here. I mean, to answer the second part of your question, what's my day-to-day like? Right now, though these kind of expressions have been beat to death, it's in this work-from-home environment that we're in. I'll tell you, most of my day is spent in situations like this. I mean, this is the most lovely conversation I get to have, but I'm on calls all day, usually taking notes, trying to make sure that nothing's sort of slipping through the cracks. Any conversation points, whether they're brought up specifically or almost flippantly, are getting documented somewhere, and that we're acting on any next steps that we have. A lot of days that means I'm on calls until later in the evening, and then I'm playing a bit of catch up, but that's all in the day's work. And
I see a lot of questions already in the chat. Don't worry, we're going to get there. I kind of want to start a little bit, grease our wheels here by just like chit-chatting a little bit. And I think Emily might be a family member of yours. Is that?
Oh, it's my little sister. Yeah.
Your little sister.
Yeah.
Hello, little sister.
Hey, Em.
Thanks for joining us.
I love you.
I was about to say I love you, and I was like, wait a second, that's extremely weird. Don't just repeat after him just because he said it.
It's like when you like order food and like somebody's like, enjoy the food, and you're like, you're
like, yeah, you too. That's exactly what it's like. I've done that so many times. So it's interesting that this producer role is so flexible, and we will come back. I see a couple questions. We're definitely gonna come back to them. Did you fall into the producer role, or did you choose the producer role? Like when you were kind of, and we'll talk about the past and kind of getting here, but was that something where you're like, oh, this job seems like it's got a lot of hats, that's kind of me, or did you kind of fall into it and you're like, oh man, this job has like a lot of hats?
I think it's sort of a gray area in between, right? Like I said, I was working as a comedian, and this is going back maybe like 10 years at this stage, but I knew that I wanted to sort of start building a career for myself. And I saw a really excellent, what felt like a really excellent opportunity for me to get in at a post-production house. And in the most basic way possible, it was explained to me that like if I could just get my foot in the door, I'd be, a lot of my responsibilities would be about, cleaning up the facility, getting coffee and lunch for people. But when I had downtime, I'd have an opportunity to sort of take a look at the landscape around me within the company and determine what route or what department might be best for me. And from sort of jumping off from that point, I did look around, and I kind of I think of myself as a creative person. I like to think of myself as a creative thinker. But I saw the production department, and I definitely saw, coming from a world, the comedy world, where I was creating like live shows, scheduling my guests for those shows. It really felt like a natural progression for me, and my skills sort of lent themselves very well to that. I always say I 1000% fell into this industry ass backwards. I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. I mean, it's built off the back of a lot of late nights, but I caught a lot of breaks along the way. But I didn't come into it necessarily because I had the passion for this specific industry. More so, I wanted to make sure that I was able to establish a career for myself. And I saw that afforded to me in this industry. And more than that, like I wanted to make sure that I was doing something that felt like a natural fit for me. And with the production department and producing in general, I found something that, my organizational skills, my communication skills, they all serve me really well in the job that I have, which I think, for anybody, it's like, that's what you want, right? You want to show up to work every day and feel like maybe you're not born to do what you're doing, but like the skills that you have inherently help you in the job that you have, that there's a natural fit there.
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of Leviathan cats up in the chat giving you a lot of love. So
Leviathan chat. I
think that means you're doing a good job. So that's the. I hope so. And hey, all the folks in the chat. I think an interesting. We're going off script. That's it. We're going off script, Mike.
Throw it away.
First question from the chat. And this is the one from Emily, from your sister. What's your favorite part of working in production versus your past jobs within the field? And I'll just tack on a little bit to this, which would be, how alike or dissimilar are they?
So when we talk about my past jobs, let me answer the question with a question first.
Oh, you're gonna do that? Then I'm gonna answer your question with another question.
I mean, can you tell I'm a good producer?
This is Friday. We're taking it there.
So, do you mean my life as a comedian, or do you mean like the roles that I had on my way to being a producer? Because I think, and I think what Emily's speaking to is I've had a number of sort of steps along the way that got me here, and I can certainly speak to that. But I can also speak to the discrepancies and what's the same and what's different between this and the life of a comedian.
I think it's interesting to do both, and just to give you a bit of context on why I made that kind of like little addition on the end, because for a lot of folks that like know me and kind of like my kind of journey through the industry, because I literally just don't stop talking on cameras, but when you were mentioning like, oh, going from that comedian kind of lifestyle, but you were still feeling like you really had that entrepreneurial kind of producer mindset of like, I want to get some stuff done, and you were booking your own shows. You weren't just kind of like going to open mics and then like going home. It sounds like you were really proactive in that sense,
100%.
Which reminds me a lot of like when I was even like, I say you know, the funny part about my experience with the business side of our industry was that I learned a lot of it at the beginning, but where my heart came from was from when I was still a trombone player, when I was still a full-time musician. And that lifestyle forces you to either get those business skills so you can get gigs,
Yep.
or, you know, perish and change or do something else, right? Or figure out like, yeah, you know what, like I'd prefer to just use it as a hobby because the amount of other stuff I have to do is kind of like not vibing it for me. And that's why I kind of added that a like or dislike. So I think you could take your pick and you know, cherry pick different parts out of the timeline where you're like, hey, you know what, like this part was really similar to production and this part was actually like really different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to tackle such a big question, like let's start at the beginning and let's start at what it was like as a comedian and what skills I've sort of been able to transfer from one career to the next. I think, Elbers, you're like so right that, and it sounds like you experienced something similar as a musician. As a comedian, if you're not out there being sort of a spokesperson for yourself, then nobody's necessarily going to do it for you. And I found myself as like a young 19, 20-year-old in New York trying to get booked on shows. And while I'd have success, like I'm always thinking about what's the next step. You know, where do I go from here? How am I building on where I'm at currently? And to me, the natural progression was how do I get my own show? How do I become? Forgive me. How do I get the responsibility of booking people and becoming the person who like manages that? So for me, it was like becoming my own best advocate, and I feel like that's something that I needed to do kind of early on in my career as well. So when I first moved to New York, it was like getting dropped into the middle of that and taking the skills that I have and building on them, being my own best advocate, whether I was talking to fans after shows, and I say fans, like tongue planted firmly in cheek on that one, but or like the people who are managing the comedy clubs. Those are people that I struck up conversations with, and I tried to figure out ways that I could, you know, find that next step. And then when I got dropped into the middle of my professional career, when I found myself, you know, wanting to build upon my career, I had to be my own advocate again. I had to be the person who was always looking for an opportunity, saying yes when things were presented to me, which I think is a huge one and something that I convey to everybody. You know, say yes to opportunities because
that's a big one.
Yeah, they do not show themselves all of the time. You know.
And just to play off that point, like a big thing I always feel is if you're only looking for one specific opportunity, you're going to miss the field of opportunities.
Very much so, right? You don't know the path.
That's going to
I
that
think
year
we all love to
like
pretend that
yes.
like that path to where we want to go is a straight line, but it so rarely is, right? Like there are things that are going to throw us to the left, throw us to the right before we ultimately get where we want to go. And it's not easy to recognize where those opportunities that, even though they might take us to the left or to the right, they're ultimately going to advance us. It's hard to identify what those are. The best advice I can ever give anybody is just say yes to them. You know, jump in and see if it works for you. You can always, you know, jump out if it doesn't.
Totally. And I just to the chat here, that data moshing, that was totally on purpose. Don't even worry. It got a little like glitchy on screen for a second. But we're good now. So that was totally on purpose, totally within our control. You know, that's part of the spiel and shtick here. So I think that's an interesting and so if that's kind of building the arc of transferable skills, you know, was there a job that you had done before where either there was something about it you just like really didn't enjoy or like, or that you were like, hey, I don't want that when I move into this next kind of chapter?
Do you know what's so funny is like there never was. Every step along the way, I was so thankful to be given like the opportunities that I had. And I mean that very sincerely. You know, I don't think I mentioned this up front when I was talking about sort of my story and where I come from, but I'm a guy who like dropped out of college. And I've always felt, yeah, you too? Another one?
Me too.
So like I always felt, not that I had necessarily had a big chip on my shoulder, but I always felt like I had something.
Chip. The chip is so big, bro.
I know.
You put a banana on, the chip is huge over here.
I'm downplaying it a little bit for sure. It definitely motivates me. But I definitely felt like I had something to prove, you know? I felt like I'd work with people with like master's degrees in television production, and I always wanted to be able to keep up with people. So even if a job or a role felt specifically challenging to me, I really did take it as a challenge and a privilege to be given the opportunity to experience that and to add one more tool to my tool belt before I got to where I ultimately wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a super healthy attitude of just like seeing challenge as opportunity and not so much seeing challenge as like a negative push down situation. 100%. I think if you overwhelm yourself, you could definitely get to that negative part, but challenge is usually like the opportunity to like keep it going, keep it growing, right? I
have a joke. It's not really a joke. I think people laugh at it a lot, but I really mean it sincerely. Whenever something sort of bad happens, and quote unquote bad happens, or like a wrench gets thrown into a project, I will say out loud, "What an opportunity!" Because it is truthfully an opportunity to fix another problem that we haven't experienced before.
Yeah, I can see why you probably get some chuckles coming back at you on that one.
And I get it too. It's again, tongue planted firmly in cheek on that one. But like I agree with you. Like that is the attitude that we all should be taking into these situations. I know it's not always possible, and we're all sometimes you get emotionally drained, and it's hard to bring that chipper side out of you. But go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I get saltier more than I get anything else.
I feel it. I know it's not always possible, but going back to the amount of hats that a producer wears, I think one of my hats is, at the end of the day, no matter how bad things are, I'm going to try and keep things light and try and smile my way through it, because I really think that people look to producers sometimes less about what they do and more about how they do it. So I think it's important to maintain that era of collectedness,
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna toffee out here a little bit.
Okay.
Because I like jumping around. I like keeping us on our toes.
I'm on board.
We had a little bit of past. We had a little bit of like story arc. I feel like we could build an anime between the two of us as main characters. I'm just saying.
Top 10
Anybody out there?
Stories, yeah.
You had hit us up, And I want to jump into something I think is an interesting question that I've never heard asked, but I feel like is a very practical question, which is, if there was something that you wish developer, and listen, folks, I'm not like, I wrote this down because I'm like human like y'all. It's not like just all in here. So if you see me like reading, it's because I am reading. I'm not going to like pretend I'm not reading. So... and I say that because I realized the sentence was really long, and I'm gonna have to read it. So, is there something we wrote it though? It's not like I just pulled it out of the internet. I don't know why am I defending. This is how Friday's devolving into chaos when I'm defending why I'm reading a question I wrote off of a screen.
Elbert, I can't see any of the questions that are being asked right now, but I think I speak for the entire audience when I say you're doing a fantastic job right now. Okay, we're all very proud of you.
If my hope is that the stream is either extremely useful or we're immediately going to become Eric Andre, and both of which are awesome. So like, we're good. Entertainment value will always be here, whether you're learning or laughing. We're going to bounce between the two.
I love it.
So here's a question.
Hit me with it.
Is there something you wish developers or artists would understand about your role in the project? Or is there a misconception that you'd like to clear up for them? Because I think that, going back to some of the things I was mentioning at the beginning of the kind of stream, I always feel that there's this kind of like us versus them between like developers and artists and producers, management, and all that kind of stuff. And it really, I feel like that once you kind of break a little bit of the us versus them, projects become so much easier.
Oh my. Yes, of course.
So, like, is there something like a misconception or something that you would like developers and artists to know about, kind of like what your role is on these kind of projects?
Do you know, I'm going to quote you. I think I'm going to have to paraphrase you a little bit here from about.
Because do you have to like bleep? Do you have to bleep half of it?
No, because you said it really well when you were trying to read this question, which is I'm human. I'm not a robot or anything like that. It's not all up here. That would be the biggest message that I would convey to anybody. And I think everybody, if we're talking about like tribal factions in a war on a project, I think everybody would probably want to convey that same message, which is I'm a person. I have flaws. I don't do everything perfectly. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we're all here to help support each other and figure this out together. So if there is any of that tension, let's put it aside for now so that we can all get along. I don't know. I'm a big proponent on projects of just sort of like breaking that ice, like you said. Like this isn't this isn't a tribal thing. This isn't us versus you guys versus the other guys. This is all of us in it together. And that's client too. That's everybody. We're all trying to work towards the same thing, and things get miscommunicated here and miscommunicated. Funny word to not be able to say out loud. Things get miscommunicated all the time, but we're all people. We're all flawed. The important thing is not to make the same mistakes over and over again.
Matt's saying he's loving Mike's attitude. Definitely have worked with producers whose motto is lie your way through it rather than smile.
Well, see what such a good liar I am. I convinced you, Matt, that I was actually telling the truth right there. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
That's the
I'm joking.
The title of this on YouTube is going to be like 700 IQ Among Us. You know, like what is all the stuff I get recommended randomly on?
Mike Pullan plays
either
12D
that or like
chess.
or like a popsicle stick instrument or something. I don't know. YouTube's recommendation are going like real strange.
No, I couldn't agree more with myself. I really do think that like that tension on any project is unnecessary. And if we can identify it and we can squash it as soon as possible, we're all the better for it.
And I think personally, like something I found interesting is that I started a lot of my beginning of the career with that tribal kind of mindset. I don't know where it came from or how it set in. I feel like it was just what I had picked up from being on other projects. And one of the things I found as I've gone kind of later and later into my career is that communication and just like a little bit of honesty goes a real long way into breaking that down.
I would take it further.
To the point where like even a little bit breaks the whole wall down. You know what I'm saying? Like the wall feels like it's a big wall, at least for, you know, I'm talking from like the developer side of things. We're like, oh, yo, like management, they took wait, what do I say? I was gonna say they took their jabs, but it's not jobs. They took like our day rate or something. But I got no way to like finish the joke. So I'm passing it back to you.
Well, what I was gonna say, and I think you're so right about this. It is communication. We're calling this sort of like tribalism, right, between different departments. And let's think about this as like actual tribalism. Like if two sets of peoples like actually encountered each other for the first time, what would be the biggest hurdle that they would face, right? It would be like the language that they speak potentially. They wouldn't be able to communicate with each other. And as departments, you know, like a producer might describe a problem differently than a developer would versus like a designer would. We're all sort of speaking different languages. And if we can start to chisel at that and sort of define what things are using the same terminology, you're right. That like goes such a long way to getting everybody on the same page and showing that we're not at war. We're all working together.
Mm-hmm. And I think an interesting thing on top of that too is I want to say consistent communication, but I also want to say foresight communication. Like, you know, something that I've found that's really worked well for me in like the last couple years is before I would always have this idea of I'm oversimplifying it just to like make it easy, but like smile until it's too bad and then flag it, right? And that's kind of like I think a lot of the mentality that newer folks in the industry, younger folks in the industry, or even folks who are like not as comfortable with conflict, they tend to have the mindset of like, let me see if I can just make it work until, oh my God, it's a catastrophe. And then they'll kind of let that information go up the chain or across the chain or whatever direction of the chain it is.
Yeah. And
I found that's really helped with me, even though it's counterintuitive, and I think especially for people who like don't like conflict, like if it stresses you out or kind of gives you anxiety, I love conflict. I realize
I like to see it. I don't like to be part of it.
I like both. And you know what? I realized I would probably be super into daytime TV if that was like a thing I could do. Yeah. I feel like I would love soap operas, I think, kind of like deep down. But I found that even just communicating that something in the future might be an issue, even though that might make a tiny bit of an uncomfortable conversation now, sets it up so that there's never a catastrophe later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least that a catastrophe is not a surprise. Because a surprise and a catastrophe at the same time are bad. A catastrophe that like everybody knew about was like something we could probably deal with. But when it's a surprise and a catastrophe, it's like it's not a good combo.
No, that's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's no real question on that, but that was something I just found interesting, at least over the last like few years for myself. Like, I find if I'm working on something, I will be much more. I don't really know what to say. I feel like just like throwing flags. That's the expression I always use. Like,
Yeah.
hey, that's cool, but it might affect this like this, or hey, that's cool, it might affect this like this, or even having some of those uncomfortable conversations like a little bit earlier. Like, I don't know if this is gonna work. You know, we can give it a try, but we should also have a secondary plan here just in case this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then if we do, you know, deliver it, then like, sweet. You know, and actually, Dr. Mojo's saying not conflict necessarily, but pressure and challenges. I think that could be a good, healthy way to look at it instead of like conflict, but sometimes the pressure of a conversation, or at least kind of like raising some challenges to, you know, the people that maybe hired you, can be tricky. Like, do you have any thoughts kind of in that kind of range?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that, firstly, yeah, I feel like your impulse is what you just described, sort of throwing up those flags early rather than later is always the right mode to go into. What I think scares people sometimes is that what could start as sort of a small flag can quickly become exacerbated. You know, going back to like speaking different languages and maybe not being on the same page about a problem.
True.
Those small problems can suddenly become very big unnecessarily, and there's a fear of sort of stepping into that conversation if it's not needed, or stressing people out unnecessarily. I would say, you know, like I said, your impulse is the right one. Flag things early, but also come prepared like with solutions. Let's make sure that the conversations that we're having surrounding problems are solution-based ones, not pointing fingers or making excuses for why things didn't happen. More so like, look, we can identify this issue or a potential issue down the line. Here's what we can do now to mitigate it or resolve it or make sure we're not facing it. But yeah, I think any producer will tell you they would so much rather have the cards laid out for them on the table and find out about a problem much earlier rather than later. Yeah, I mean, waiting until the last minute, I think we've probably all been there in our careers, whether it was us specifically or somebody else on the project, threw up that flag too late, and if we had known earlier, we could have saved everybody some late nights and headaches. So the earlier things can be raised, the earlier we can have that conversation, and keeping that conversation focused on solutions, the better off we're all going to be.
I think that's a great point, because I feel like I wrote a blog post once where I was saying, first, never be a yes man. There's nothing worse, or a yes woman by any stretch. Like, you know, yes should not be your default answer for like everything. Also, no shouldn't be.
Yes is my default answer for most things. I know. We're all learning. We're all growing at Elbers. I'm not perfect.
That's true. But no should also not be a default answer. And I think what you were saying is really like, because at the end of the day, like, everybody wants to get to the same goal, and you know, what I found interesting is over the years, like, I find that clients are way more willing to play ball than I ever imagined. You know, like, at the beginning, I thought, oh, well, the client said a thing, I have to hit exactly the thing, otherwise everybody will be disappointed on Earth, right?
They're telling you they have an itch, and they need that itch scratched. And they're trying to communicate to you the best way that they think will scratch that itch, but they don't always know the answer to that. And it's our job to figure out how to scratch that itch most effectively. You know, going back to my past experience as a comedian and as an improviser, I think like one thing that a lot of people know about improv is that you're supposed to say yes and, which can.
I hate saying yes and. I'm just gonna say. Well, I got another friend who says always say yes and. And I'm like, I agree with the sentiment. I just hate saying it.
Well, let me throw something else into your vernacular real quick. I agree with you that yes and can get you into trouble in the professional world, especially when you're dealing with additional requests. But we need to learn how to say no, but. No, I can't do this, but this is what we can achieve. This is what would work. And it's that conversation in the business world that I think is a very important one. Because you're right, you know, we get feedback and it's easy to sort of check the boxes and make sure that everything's addressed. But sometimes there's some subtext to what's being said or what's being communicated that isn't always, you know, the most direct thing in the world.
Yeah.
How do we scratch that itch? That's what I like to say.
And I think everybody kind of benefits. Like, the faster the itch gets scratched, the cheaper the itching, scratching device costs to build.
Yeah.
Usually good for everybody, I think. So if you're joining us a little bit late, we got my friend Mike Pullan. I pointed at the wrong direction again.
You're on this side of me.
Yeah, we got my friend Mike Pullan here, senior creative producer at Leviathan, and we're talking about production, workflow, and we're talking about a lot of things. The past, our soon-to-be anime arc, potentially.
I love it.
But feel free, if you're in the chat, throw some questions. If you heard something where you're like, hey, you know what, like, can you guys riff on that a little bit? Throw it in the chat. You got some side questions about kind of some of the stuff we're talking about, throw them in the chat. I'm reading them. That every time you see me kind of like do one of these, that's me reading chat or looking at my questions. It is one or the other. So I'm with you. Hit me up if you got some questions. Hit us up. So I think this kind of leads into an interesting. We're talking about things we like on the project. What do you think makes a good producer? Also, on a little side tangent, hold on. So there's two parts of this question. Let's go. What makes a good producer? We'll start there, because otherwise I'm going to ask you like 4 questions at once. So let's start there.
I think the strongest skill a producer can have is being able to listen to questions, and even if it's 4 parts, being able to answer them, sort of broken out clearly. All that to say, like, communication to me is like the most paramount thing a producer can have. We talk about like the versatility up front in this conversation, and that's part of it. The other side of it is like taking the versatility that you have and being able to communicate, exactly what's needed in any given situation. It's one thing to be able to just like be in the middle of anything. It's another thing to be able to be in the middle of anything and be able to direct traffic or have that whatever conversation is necessary. So to me, it's like, are you able to communicate? Are you able to communicate clearly? Speak decisively. The foundation of that being like the individual's versatility and ability to jump into any situation and sort of get their bearings. That makes a good producer.
It's a tricky one for me. I'm trying to like pinpoint for me what has always been.
I'd be interested to know, Elders, like what you think makes a good producer. Because I just in general, I certainly have enjoyed, you and I have worked together, and we have a good relationship. I think you and I have like a good working rapport. But truthfully, I don't know if you think I'm a good producer or not. I assume you do, because I am a good producer.
I don't even know what a producer is, bro.
Yeah, you started the interview by asking that question. That's a fair point.
What is a producer? Yeah, this interview is actually this whole thing is just a setup for me.
Yeah, all the viewers are plants. All the viewers are plants.
Yeah. This is actually internal. This is how we're doing those new internal reviews, by the way.
I love it.
I think for me,
what do you think?
There's 2 kind of things I'm always thinking about. One is openness. Because I think, especially because so many folks have that ingrained tribalness within kind of like our psyche, one of the things that really helps, I think, even almost the preface of the communication side of things, is having that openness to communicate, right? And communicate in kind of like an honest and like open way. Because I feel like there's a lot of gigs I've been on where the producer has been a very clear communicator, good with kind of task and stuff, but I just never felt like if I talk to this person, I'm not getting anything back. If I try and have like this person is holding the wall of the castle, and if I come up and be like, hey, yo, can I like come and like we like have tea and like chit chat or something? They're gonna be like, no, like just tell me from like down there and like we'll deal with it.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like
on a personal level, that's just like never me, right? You've worked with me enough to know that like I'm very open, very transparent about not just like what's going on, but how I feel about things. And that's always really like served me really well in my career, is just speaking the truth in situations. So like my individual truth, and understanding that like I'm surrounded by a team of experts on a project. I'm a producer expert, but I'm not a touch design expert. I'm not an After Effects expert. I have people around me who are, and we can all support each other to figure out this project. But coming back to it, it's like, that communication, that open line is always the most important thing. What a beautiful moment.
I was gonna pour one out for all the folks still working in After Effects. You know what I'm saying?
Oh. There's good people in After Effects still.
Just kidding. Yeah, the tricky part about openness is I don't really even off the top of my head have an idea of like if you wanted to practically be open, what steps would you take?
Here's
so we might have to leave that one abstractly with the viewers, unless you have some idea of like how to practically be open. And Luke, no, bro, no, don't worry, bro. I love you. You know, I'm just saying. It was just, you know, it was a quick, like a real time. You know, we're talking about tribes here, a little real time, like.
Yeah, the real rivalry's going. You guys are gonna have to bury the hatchet. I want to see an email to you from you to the After Effects community for that one.
My public apology after.
What I'll say, I'll just reiterate some advice I got as like a young producer when I was living in New York. Less advice, more so just like something to be mindful of. I was told that I would know that I was a good producer, or that I had sort of become a good producer, when I felt like I could jump onto any conversation or jump into any room, have any conversation, and still be myself. I know that's like a kind of a strange bar to hit.
Yeah.
But to me, that was really like where I kind of pushed to get myself to, where I could jump onto a conversation with you, or I could jump onto the conversation with my clients, and I could have I could speak in the same way, in the same level of comfort, and be myself. Most importantly, it's just like be myself in those situations, and that's how I kind of recognize, like, not to say that I had made it, but like that I was a producer. I was good at my job. I was able to be myself in any situation that I walked into.
And do you think that's more from a confidence level, or is it more from a, you know, level of being able to, I guess not, I don't want to say like not lie, but, you know, like, you know, where, because that, I think there's a sense where you can, I mean, sometimes I get on the, I'll be real with the chat. This is the first time in like a week I took off my linen robe. I got a robe. I just wear it all the time on like calls and everything, right?
It's a strong look. It really is.
It's a strong. I think it's got a vibe. It's got a vibe. It better have a vibe for the Etsy cost of it. Let me tell you that much. But you know, for me, that's kind of like a comfort and confidence level of that's where I feel that. But do you also feel it in those areas, or does being yourself come from more of like technical proficiency? Because we also have a comment that was VJ Dr. Mojo was saying, a good producer actually knows what all departments do.
Yeah.
You know, does that play into it for you?
I think we're speaking about the same thing here. Like that ability to be myself comes from a place of understanding what my role and my responsibilities are here. It affords me like the luxury of not having to put on any sort of airs about myself or pretend that I understand something, because I do understand it. So I always, you know, I'm the type of producer, I want to try and understand as much as I can. I think any expectation that a producer is always going to understand everything that happens in a pipeline, or you know, every step along the way, it's difficult to do sometimes, especially on more complicated projects. But I do like to know as much as I can, so that I can speak in confidence and be myself when I'm speaking that way. That's really where the confidence comes from, is understanding.
Yeah, I guess they're all tied together, right? Like having some kind of like knowledge gives you confidence. Confidence lets you be yourself. Being yourself, you know, allows you to kind of work better, more effectively, learn more stuff.
It's all the same mechanism inside of us, right? It's just like, how do I put myself in a position where I feel like I don't have to put on airs or pretend to be somebody that I'm not in this situation. I'm a good enough person for this situation because I have everything I need to be successful in it.
Dom is saying you guys are dropping some wisdom.
That's what we're here for.
You, Dom. Thank you,
Speaking
Dom.
the truth.
I'll send you my PayPal account later. No, I'm just kidding. I was gonna say Venmo, then I realized we don't have Venmo in Canada, so it's like decent joke, but like wouldn't work. Chris is asking an interesting question here. Could you riff a bit on estimation? How do you attach effort levels and timelines to weigh out their projects?
Oh, interesting.
And does that fall? You know, sorry to interrupt before you get in there. Does that normally fall on your kind of plate as a producer, or are you kind of just managing estimates coming from the doer people, for lack of a better word?
It comes back to the versatility a bit, and recognizing that like just like every producer is an individual and is going to have their own way of doing things, and logistically just be a human being, an individual. Every artist is different too, and the way that they're going to quote things out or think about things from a timing standpoint is always going to be different. I mean, most people, and I think this is like the natural thing to do, is like think about what it would take for them to accomplish a goal when you're asking them for numbers or for a quote. But sometimes you're in a situation, especially as a studio, where you're not just thinking about what it would take one individual, but you have to think about what it would take for, say, if somebody else had to slide into that role. And you have to be able to recognize sort of how each individual person likes to think about quoting out numbers, and then sort of unify it in a certain way. So there are going to be people where you can hear what they have to say and trust 100%, like to the T, what they think it's going to take to get something done. But you also understand that there are some people, for better or for worse, and this isn't like a knock against anybody, that you need to either add, time padding or maybe have a follow-up conversation, because look, some people, I know I've met plenty of people that I think are absolutely brilliant in my career, and they can be an incredibly senior artist, but when you talk to them, they're speaking about what it would take for them to accomplish something. But in the reality, I know it isn't necessarily them who's going to be working on it. So I'd have to take those numbers and think about what it would take for somebody less seasoned, less experienced, and make sure that we're accounting for that too. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I would not have imagined that. But now that you mention it, totally makes sense, right? And I guess especially from a producer standpoint, we're going to talk a little bit about this a little bit later, the kind of balance of how it works dealing with internal teams versus external teams. And I know from my kind of perspective, estimates are an interesting thing, because I think it's a skill you have to develop, but it happens so infrequently in a closed loop that allows you to give yourself feedback that we almost never end up developing it. And I know folks who are deep in their careers, and I'm not like free of any kind of like mistakes in quotes and stuff, but because, with any kind of system where we're trying to build a skill, I always find the critical thing is kind of put your hypothesis or whatever your best judgment is at that moment, do the thing, and then review the done process versus the estimation. And then wherever those things differ, you can kind of like bridge the gaps, patch the holes, do whatever you want to do. The problem with estimation that's really difficult is, oftentimes like most of our estimates never go through, right? Like how much is it going to cost to do this? Oh, this much money. Oh, we don't have it. Okay, cool. Well, there's like nothing. It didn't even leave the starting line for you to be able to like get better at doing that. And then the problem is, on the flip side, when something does go through, I find like our industry is pretty funny for how chaotic everything always is. It's like very everyone's chill, but like projects are always chaos. I can't remember the last time I was on a project is like, this project isn't chaos. So
it's always the best laid plans of mice and men, right? You can plan all day, and I feel this as a producer on every project I'm on. You plan and you plan and you plan, but ultimately there's always going to be something that pops up that was unaccounted for, some wrench in the pipeline that we didn't necessarily foresee, or some unknown problem that wasn't able to be forecasted at the beginning. It's about planning, it's about executing, and then it's about replanning and proceeding to do that over and over again until the end of a project.
And I think to that point, it becomes very difficult, because even if you had set your original kind of like hypothesis of like, this is how I think it'll go, this is my estimate, by the time that thing like comes back to loop, you're looking at almost something so unrecognizable to the original that you don't even know how to like, how could I get better at that original thing that I tried to do when this was these things don't even line up. And I think that's a tricky thing. And I think like the best advice I could give from the development side of that is probably to assume you're working at 70% capacity if you are doing it yourself. And I think to Mike's point, if you have other folks working, you can't assume your time is the same as their time. Because there's no, and then you just have to try and review often. Like even if you're a quarter into the project, think about so far from now till a quarter, how has this been? Because then there might be a change, and then you're going to have to evaluate that section differently. But self-reflection is a big thing I always do a lot. I'm always just thinking about, okay, well, if I was going to run this process back, how would I make it better?
I'm the same way.
What was the trouble?
Tweaking the way that I function, the way that I work. even like on an individual level, outside of every project that I'm working on. Like I think a lot of producers have like their own sort of like idiosyncrasies and how they like to keep themselves organized. And I think for me, it's always a process of refining that and figuring out ways that I can, managing multiple projects at a time, keep my brain free to be thinking about them at like full capacity. How do I keep myself organized? There's always a certain amount of tinkering that goes into that, which is exciting.
And we do have a comment, which is a kind of side ask here. VJ Dr. Mojo is saying, so this was actually a comment from the earlier conversation, but reapplies now, so I wanted to pull it in. Also kind of depends on what the client is willing to pay for. And VJ Dr. Mojo is saying, when I write estimates, I sometimes have to shift line items accordingly. For example, paid meal breaks, no way. But a piece of gear for $1,000, no problem.
Oh, and producers are liars. That's what I heard. That's what I heard earlier.
Wait, where was that?
That was a joke from earlier today. I think somebody made a comment about producers.
Yeah.
But here it turns out that everybody's got a little bit of deception in them. Interesting to find out.
No, 100%. And I think I agree with that. There is, unions are a funny thing.
Okay.
I like them in concept. They frustrate me in practice. And that's like, especially as someone who really tries to take care of people working and appreciating that, that's a hard bridge for me to personally gap. Because especially in our, like, Mike, I don't know if you guys know, but like, if you're a touch developer, we got no union. So you like roll up into the gig, you're working, and you're like, why are those AV integrators taking lunch for so long? Why are they all leaving exactly at 4:30? Like, we got shit to do, right? Like, so there's always a little, and that's like, going back to the tribalism kind of sense. There's like the rogue nation of like interactive immersive artists, and then like the state nation of like unionized AV integrators is like another one.
No, I hear that. I mean, without getting like political in any way about this conversation, I think that the industry that we work in is still an emerging one. It's like by its nature a consistently evolving and emerging set of circumstances, right? New technology is always coming out. There are always new ways to be doing things, and in that sense, like it always has felt like a very new industry, even if it's been around for a little while. And I think to your point, like unions can be effective things, and I'm not advocating for anything. But what I am saying is that like
you don't want situations where you don't want us to unionize. If we unionize right now and we say Mike told us to,
no, please don't. I was very concerned that this exact thing would happen. So let me say unequivocally now, I'm not advocating for anything. Only to say that like there are industries where unions work, and there are industries where we've seen things, for any number of reasons, not work, whether that's issues within the union itself or the industry itself. I can't speak to whether or not it would work for us, but I can certainly appreciate the frustration that people who don't have a union see when they see other people who are able to take sort of those breaks or leave at a different time. Because look, Elbows, if we're speaking really, we know that the industry that we're in, it requires sometimes a lot of late nights and long efforts from us. And a lot of times that's something that we do joyfully, because we got into this industry because we have a passion for what we do, and we're trying to chase that passion and make amazing things. But to your point, like it's difficult to not let that sort of frustration creep in sometimes when you're thinking about other people, or seeing them enjoy their long lunches or what have you. But we have to stay focused on what we're here for, what we're here to build, and what got us here. What are we in this industry for? And that's to make these awesome things.
And I think to your point, that's like something that's gonna change and grow over the next like bunch of years, anyways. As it's like now that we got kids coming out of school, we didn't used to have kids coming out of school doing that. Like now we got kids coming out of school like doing this kind of stuff, and I think that's just going to continue to develop, and there's going to be all kinds of stuff. I think going back to kind of VJ Dr. Mojo's point, I think you kind of got to play it by ear with the client that you have. I don't think that the default always needs to be let me hide line items in like other line items. No. I think it's a good thing to have in your back pocket if you're really finding that like, hey, you know what, like this client doesn't want me to eat lunch, then I guess like you got to do what you got to do.
Let me be clear. I don't think there's a client, like I know it must feel like the opposite sometimes. But there's not a client in the world that doesn't want you to be able to eat lunch and like afford your life, and be able to operate at like your most proficient on a project. Those conversations are difficult to have, and I find it, it's my responsibility as the producer on a project who's working directly with the creative team, the development team, to make sure that they're put in a position to be successful. But I just want to be really clear, like, nope. Budgetary conversations come up, and sometimes you're right. Like those sort of line items can be the first thing to go, or really be like quantified as like the cost of doing business to a certain extent, right? Like nobody's paying for my lunch every day, but it's not because people don't want you to be able to live your life or be able to eat lunch. There are probably just other pressures on the project separate from that.
And I think a big thing with this one is also, going back to what I was saying earlier, like that idea of having conversations that have a little bit of pressure or challenge to them. Because I think a lot of the time people don't ask to eat when they're hungry. I see that all the time. Like people are like, man, I'm starving. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything, bro? Like, let's go eat. Let's go have a bite like right now. Like what, because maybe the person you're working with isn't hungry and you can't wait for them to get hungry. Like, I think that's like a good thing to have. And communication, I think can really help bridge some of those gaps where, to your point, like, why would the client not want you to eat? Because if you don't eat, you pass out like this.
Exactly.
Which the least productive thing for the project is the least productive thing for the project. But I feel like if you don't tell someone like, hey, like I just need a break for an hour to kind of like get some food in me, collect my thoughts, and make a game plan. I think I can't imagine a client that wouldn't be like, okay, cool, like let's regroup in like an hour.
Right? What we really should be doing, and what like from the ground level we should be doing, is making sure that we're accounting for the opportunity for people to get whatever breaks they need. And not to say that that's always possible, but like we can plan for things. We can always plan for things. Going back to like being transparent, if you need a specific day off, like let's talk about that and let's build it into the calendar up front. It makes me smile to hear what you're saying about like, dude, why didn't you say something if you're hungry? Because I find it's a fight for me too all the time. I find that like, and I'm sure you're like this, Elbers, because you're like me in that like you've kind of had to build your own world for yourself. You're so used to playing by your own rules and defining what things are supposed to happen and when they're supposed to happen, that when you're put in a situation where you're needing to play by somebody else's rules, or you're almost expecting other people to play by the rules that you made up in your head, and that is not fair. And I find myself constantly checking myself, keeping myself in check. Like, am I just asking this person to like do something that I have in no way communicated to them that I expect them to do? Something like letting me know that it's okay to go for lunch. And then like, is it fair for me to be upset about that if I haven't communicated my needs to somebody? I just find that like I'm the type of person who I need to be organized. I need to have like rules and things to keep myself in line. And I find myself frustrated with people unnecessarily because they are not playing by the imaginary rules that I have made up in my head. And it's just something I think we all should be checking against.
I think, and to your point, like especially on the development side of things, that's been something that's really changed from an attitude I used to have before, where having other developers working with me was negative, to now it's a positive and fun.
Yeah.
And the only difference was exactly that shift you're talking about, right? Because the negative part was I expected, why aren't you guys working as fast as me? Or why aren't you able to why do I have to explain these things? Like it was real, like that kind of mindset. And
it's like perception too. It's like, I'm perceiving that you guys don't care about this as much as I care about this. It's just not fair on any level, is it?
Yeah. And now I'm kind of more on that sense of like, oh man, like everyone's working. Like what more could I ask for? This is amazing. Right. Like this, everyone's working and talking and keeping track of this is fantastic. So like total, just a complete change of experience, minor change of like perception, which I think is interesting. So we got a lot of comments and questions in the chat.
Oh no.
No, they're good ones.
Stuff I said about unions earlier, was it?
No, don't even worry, bro. We'll cut it and post it. They won't even. This one, actually, I'd like to do a quick little note on, which is VJ Dr. Mojo was saying, I've done a lot of large corporate jobs where the schedules with back-to-back rehearsals and sessions where they forgot the crew has to break to eat, and they have some PA bring you a plate because you can't get off the headset. And I will say this is something that I have found, and maybe this goes back to kind of what we were talking about, what makes a good producer. I feel like in those situations, what's really missing is somebody with some kind of confidence in their seniority, right? Like in that situation, if I was on that project, we would absolutely stop and have a break because I would say something. I would just go. I would draw the line in the sand and be like, this is where it is. It's break or bust, right? And I think the problem becomes like, whether it's because of tribalism or the communication, like kind of like not working between all the different parties, I feel like a lot of folks maybe aren't as confident as they could be to just step up and be like, hey, we need to like have a break now. That's what it means to be like a human and to like need food and bathroom and like things like that. So I can, all that union, like even in even completely like when I'm on gigs, I'm not a union. I've been in those situations exactly where clients like we have to be on headset. I'm like, I understand where you're coming from. Don't worry, we're going to make sure everything gets done. But the first step in making sure everything gets done is for us to actually like have food, get energized. Otherwise, this is just a downhill from there. And usually when you kind of like explain that, everyone's like, oh, geez, I didn't know that was going to happen if we didn't eat. Like,
I would say too, in situations like that, there's an expression that I'm struggling to remember the exact wording of, but you shouldn't account things to malice if they can be perceived as ignorance. If somebody's not coming up to you and saying,
interesting, I like that.
Yeah, if somebody's not coming up to you and saying, hey guys, now's the time that you're supposed to be eating your lunch, let's not make the assumption that it's because they don't want you to eat lunch. Let's just assume that they were not aware that it was their responsibility to come up to you and let you know that you're supposed to eat lunch now. And if that's the situation, if it happens on day one, vocalize it. Say to the producer, hey, we didn't really get an opportunity to eat. I want to make sure that moving forward, we've like allotted time. Can I get your support on that? At the beginning of this conversation, I think I said it's important just not to make the same mistakes over and over again. And that's really what I mean is if we're all communicating clearly, it's not to say that we can avoid problems, but we can speak to them, solve them, and make sure that we're not suffering the same problems over and over again. That if day one you didn't get time to eat lunch, we can figure it out for day 2, day 3, day 4.
I think that's like a beautiful way to answer that. Like, I really think that's the truth in most cases. Like, especially like even, I've had some folks on sites doing stuff, and I feel like I spend more time asking them like, hey, like when are you guys gonna get lunch? Because I don't want to have repeats of like, because maybe this is because I don't know if we have a word in English for the word in Farsi, which is shikamu, which is like somebody who is like, really loves eating, like somebody who's leads their stomach kind of leads the way forward.
Oh, one of them. Whatever it is, it's me. That's what I am. Yeah,
so like for me, like eating is such an important part of like life, work, like all that kind of stuff. I think to your point, like that's always like, we didn't get it yesterday. Oh, let's get it tomorrow. Let's make sure tomorrow we're a little bit on top of like the food game, making sure like even whenever anyone's doing anything, they're well fed, got coffee, got snacks, got carrots, apples, whatever that game is, like you got it and you're good.
Part of being a producer too, I'll say, is sort of understanding what motivates different people. And if you've got people on your team, whether it's making sure that they are given time to like eat lunch, or whatever circumstance, if that is a thing that motivates them and keeps them on task, it's my job as a producer to be able to identify that and put them in a position where they're able to check those boxes. I want my team to be up and running, and there's no cookie cutter solution to any of this, right? We really have to think on a core level, like what motivates our team, and that's different for everybody.
That's 4D chess right there. Yeah, and as Niche says, only taking gigs with Horma Sabzi delivery. That's I'm putting that in, like how Van Halen had the blue M&M.
Oh, the rider, yeah.
I'm putting Horma Sabzi delivery up in mine too. That'll be good.
Elders, I don't know if you know if this is true, but I was actually speaking to somebody about that exact kind of request. I think it was yesterday. Those
Really?
band riders that have very specific things on them.
They're smart.
Because like we've all heard like, oh, look how nitpicky this person is. They only want like 20-year aged whiskey in a bottle shaped like a guitar. That's the only thing that they have on their rider. You know, look how specific that is and frustrating that is. But I've heard before that the reason that they'll put things like that on the rider is if they walk into that room and say that bowl of blue M&Ms isn't on the table, it means that the team that's been setting up this event hasn't been checking all of the boxes, making sure that everything's buttoned. And if that bowl of M&Ms is wrong, what does that mean about the lights that they're hanging above me on the stage? So they do that, and maybe this isn't true. Maybe this is just like
No, it's definitely true. That's what I've heard too.
Yeah, like that. Those specific items are important because they're canaries in the coal mine to indicate any other problems you might see from a technical standpoint. To me, it's brilliant.
Brilliant. And I'll tell you, as somebody who kind of is stomach led in life, the blue M&Ms don't taste any different than the other ones.
So, I've never been a big chocolate guy. I don't really like to eat too much chocolate.
Okay, cool. So we have some fun questions we'll get into, and then we'll kind of come back to some of these deeper questions. But if you're joining us now, welcome. You're a little bit late, but don't worry. All these recordings are going to be up on the YouTube and the Twitch after, so you can catch up on the first half of our is this our first improv show here together? You can catch up on the last hour of it. Please feel free to throw questions in the chat. You know, we got a couple questions we'd like to talk about, but we're also open to taking this in a completely different direction. You know, we're talking about what it means to produce projects. You know, how producers work with developers and artists. Yeah, we go anywhere with this. So, here's a fun question for you. And this is fun on two parts. I think the first part is the fun question that Liz Yardley put in the chat. Thank you for that question. But also, I had a question that kind of like builds on it, which is, and I'm going to ask this. I'm just going to ask it. No, see, I'm doing the thing. I'm thinking too much about it. Here's the question. If our industry was a football game, what position would the producer be? And I was only going to ask because I don't know anything about football. So can you explain why it would be quarterback?
No, I say that jokingly. I'll tell you, it's not a position on the field. It's the coach. We're the coach. We're not out there actually executing anything. I leave that to my artists. They're the ones who are making the plays and making the incredible things happen that are going to be repeated on ESPN the next day. I'm the coach behind the scenes who's making sure that my team's motivated and in the best place possible to execute, on the field. And
what about, would you say the same for NBA?
Oh yeah, I think it really is. It's that behind the scenes. Even to take it back a step further, you're almost like the GM of like the team, right? You're like the guy who's like, okay,
the head of basketball operations.
Yeah, like who are the players that we need on this team to be like? How does this team shaped? But we got to bring in somebody who's like a great ball handler or somebody who can post up. We've got to find somebody who can do this or that, like that. That's the job of the producer. I leave all the dunking, all of the flea flicker plays, all of the exciting stuff to my team. I just want to be there to support them as much as I can.
And I'll say, Diego, I am coming back to your question in a moment. Diego had a really good question, how to identify on projects who is the producer. We'll come back to that in a second. We're just taking a little detour for some fun and entertainment here. All Hell Breaks Loops is asking, is there a mustache top and touch designer? No, but if there isn't, like here's your sample. If you need template footage, there it is. Actually, and Steve is asking, could you reintroduce Mike? Would love to know more about what he is working on. Sorry, joined late. No problem, Steve. Mike is a senior creative producer at Leviathan. He's joining us today to talk about producing, kind of working in our industry. Mike, you've had a kind of long background in a lot of different things, starting from, you were saying, comedy, improv for a lot of years, getting into kind of VFX production, and then kind of making your way into kind of more interactive and immersive works. If you're unfamiliar with Leviathan, by all means, can one of the Leviathan cats, if you don't mind, throw the Leviathan link in the chat, just so I don't have to like go crazy looking for browser tabs. Leviathan is a fantastic company. Probably folks will know them all the way from back in the day from the first Amon Tobin ISAM show. I think that was like an amazing show and has been doing fantastic work ever since, all around the world. lots of big projects. It's very, very, very cool company. So, I mean, did I miss anything, Mike, about you?
No, I mean that's the gist of it. You know, it felt like a longer process when I was actually living through it, but I mean that's the gist of my
doesn't
career.
it always? Doesn't it always? Okay, so we will come, Diego. I'm going to come to your question next. Adrian, I see your question. We're coming back to that in a second, because I had a question here, which, you know, is kind of our little behind the scenes. You know, because I am very new to sports.
Oh,
you know,
oh, good.
so,
I'm so glad this is where this is going. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we got to go here a little bit. I think it's interesting because and let me tell people how my sports situation started. Played soccer growing up, a little bit. Was goalie. You know, they always put the chubby kid in the net because he's this kid's not running anywhere. Like this kid's not going back and forth on the field. Like, come on now. No, but he's fearless. He'll jump and stop the ball. Cool.
Yeah,
That's this guy. Then I played a little bit of rugby in high school. Then I realized rugby like didn't exist in Canada, so like that's gone. Then I kind of went real dark on sports for a long time. Had a few like stints with like was into UFC kind of stuff. Got out of that.
Yeah.
Then what really picked it up for me again was actually esports becoming a thing. Because I found I could connect with esports because I always like was playing games as a kid, and then watching like this whole like production and a league and like competition at like this such like these kids are so much better than I would ever be at these video games. I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like I could like watch this stuff.
Yeah. It's a huge market.
You know, it was my good huge market. Oh, big market. We can come back to esports and talk about that anytime. But so then once I had that kind of like, oh, so this is why like people connect to sports because, you know, they played the sport in some capacity or kind of like liked it. And then this is like, there's a production and there's like a thing here. Then my good buddy Max kind of got me into NBA really right. And it kind of was right around the time when, you know, Raptors won, the chip or the ring. I don't know what it's chip ring. It all called trophy. They're all the same.
Yeah, it's a championship. It's, you know, you get the ring. Call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm happy for Toronto.
That's how new I am to this. By the way, I don't know what the thing is called. The championship trophy ring chip, but I'm learning. So
well, that's when I entered the picture in this whole story, right? Because you and
that's when you entered the picture.
You mentioned like you and I have been having a lot of conversations about basketball and a little bit on the low key, you know, especially as like the hours get on in the day and the games start in the afternoon. You and I on a regular basis at this stage are like checking in with each other to see who's watching what
who's
game.
Playing. What are you watching? Who's doing good?
What's
kooky Kyrie doing? Like, you know, and I think so. You know, my long-winded like getting into like sports a little bit. I guess my question is, what kind of got you into sports, and why would you think or imagine like so many people in our industry aren't into sports by nature? Because I think there's so much interesting connections with our world. There's so much like high-end broadcast and stuff going on that's interesting to watch from one perspective. Sports are kind of fun. Like, what got you into it, and what do you kind of connect from like all the sports you like to yourself and your work?
That's another great question. I mean, just to start at the beginning there, I got into sports probably like a lot of like young people get into sports. Like my dad loved it. My dad used to watch every, you know, Philadelphia Flyers game. And if I wanted to like spend extra time with my dad, I'd be sitting there silently next to him watching the game and just trying to soak in as much as I can. And if I wanted to have like more conversations with my dad, I needed to learn about the teams and learn about the players and, you know, have an opinion on these things. So it was really, you know, beneath the subtext of my sports fandom is like how I, you know, is wanting to spend time with my dad, wanting to be close to him. So it just sort of, it was born from that. And I think some of my other sort of like little hobbies have like really over the course of my life exacerbated my fandom. You know, you and I have talked about like the sports cards that I buy.
Guys, I'm gonna get a breaker box soon.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm gonna get my first. I'm gonna get my first breaker box, people.
You know, I'm an avid collector, so like the sports card thing just sort of like really lends itself well to my passions. As far as like how I apply sports in my professional life or anything like that, you know, outside of like the analogies of me being a coach and my team being the player, I really like it is sort of relegated to a hobby for me. I'll say this, like, I think it's very important for people not to put all of their stake in their happiness and their joy into one individual aspect of their life.
Totally.
So I try to have a number of things that I'm either thinking about or working on, little side projects, just something else to capture my interests so that I'm not, you know, when you're trading stocks, they talk about diversifying your portfolio, and that's what I try to do in my life, is like make sure that my source of happiness, my source of joy isn't all coming from the same place. So in my mind, like the sports thing is like this completely, even the card thing is like a completely separate thing from my career, but it does bring me joy. It's something that I'm like constantly and have constantly been engaged with almost my entire life. And it's like such a pleasure for me. Even though you're right, it's rare to find other people in the industry sometimes that are as passionate about sports as I can be. It is such a privilege to get to talk to people about it sometimes, because it's like unearthing like a whole other side of myself that I get to share and find out about somebody else too. I think like, and I've said this for years, if I had like a dream job, my dream job would be to host a show where I interview fans of other sports teams, so that I can understand what it's like to be, say, like a Toronto Raptors fan, or you know, like a San Diego Padres fan. Like really get into the mind state of it.
I almost popped off a little bit there. We're still in the bubble. Like, there was talking about it in the media. Like, you almost got me popping off.
I talk about it. I want it. You know, I'm concerned about your boys right now playing in Tampa Bay. I feel bad for you guys.
I know.
But to me, you know, there's certain things.
I think there's an interesting. I think, and that's a really interesting way to think about it, because I feel like it is so refreshing for me to have something completely different to talk about. You know, because otherwise, and especially like in our industry, like a lot of time your friends become people you work with or have worked with, and most of the time your conversations will be kind of like work adjacent in some sense.
Let's call it like it is here, Elbers. Like we're both men. In our like 30s, I actually don't know how old you are, but like I'm assuming you're somewhere around my age. We recognize at this stage in our life that like making new friends is a difficult thing to do. You know, we're not in school anymore where we're just, you know, sort of thrown into a mix of new people all the time. So you're so right. Like the people that we work with do become our best friends in a lot of ways, because we are like very focused on our jobs. And it is so exciting to find people like it has been like such a pleasure for me to get to talk to you about basketball, even though I know like you're just getting up to speed on it. I can tell talking to you that like, you're asking like a ton of questions, which I love, which means you're really like thinking about it.
I'm trying to get into the drama, bro. I love
I always say it's
Harden,
like the best.
dude, why would they take Harden to the Nets? Why would they do it?
I'm of two minds about that, and I've told you how I feel. Like I'm excited to have the Durant Harden combination back in the NBA, because I do feel like it was taken away from us in those early OKC days. That being said, I'm a diehard 76ers fan, and having those two dudes along with Kyrie Irving in my division does not make me feel good as a fan. But we'll see. We know that. I think what you'll find out, Elbers, is that a lot of times these sort of super teams in the NBA get built and then broken apart just as quickly without much pomp and circumstance, you know. And I'm thinking specifically.
Oh, I'll be pumping and circumstancing.
I'm calling out the 2004 Lakers right now with Gary Payton and Karl Malone, who weren't able to get the job done against Detroit. Those teams are sometimes built to fail, unfortunately.
Liz is saying Coach Pullan on the scene. Agreed.
Right.
So let's kind of like diverge back into some questions we got here. We got a lot of good questions. Let's try just for, because I mean, hey, we got 40 minutes, but we're, you know, time flying. You know what I'm saying?
I was so concerned up front. I was like, how am I supposed to fill 2 hours of time? I'm not that interesting. But this is really.
Oh no, bro! I was like, totally, don't even worry. Yeah, which is that's what I always tell everybody. Just like, chill, come on. I'll have like a couple of little like conversation-y topics, but like the rest rolls itself out. You know, you let it happen. So what I want to try and do is hit a couple questions, maybe in a speed round format, and then we can even come back to some of them as, you know, if we're feeling like we got a lot of time, or we can move on to some of the other questions we got. So here's a good question from Diego, and then we'll hit David. I do see your question there. So let's start with Diego's question, which is, how can we identify on different projects who the producer is? For example, the client hires you as the producer, but to scratch their itch, we need to share the creative responsibility. And I think probably like adding a little bit to this question is, and actually, you know, I was speaking with a very nice person the other day and just talking about their project and asking them some of these similar questions, like, you know, this is your project, but are you going to be the creative director? Like, are you going to be the technical director? Are you going to produce? You know, kind of like, where do you see your role? I think for me, that's a bit of a tricky one, because if somebody doesn't really like self-identify as taking on that job,
yeah,
then you almost need to say to yourself, well, no one's taking on that job. I'll probably have to carry some of that weight and distribute it maybe amongst ourselves, like if you're working on your own team or something like that. But there are gigs that don't have producers. They basically just have client who says do a thing, and then you have to do the thing, and maybe you're playing a bit of producer with the client, or you're playing a bit of middle management.
Yeah. What
there's
I'm
no real
hearing from
clear.
you is that
There's no
sometimes
clear
you
one
don't
on
always
that.
get a producer, but it sounds like you always kind of need one to a certain extent, right? Whether
I like it.
It's the person wearing multiple hats as like on the box / producer. There does need to be some level of accountability from somebody on any project at some level.
And I think to your point, like talking about earlier, like accountability, but facilitation. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I find on project needs to happen, and it has nothing to do with any of the work. Like somebody sends you an asset folder, like, oh, okay, cool, let's bring it in, like rename the files, put them in, like, you know, maybe that may or may not be a producer's role technically, but to your point, like in that kind of flexible space, if I had to kind of self-produce my own thing, like those would be the kinds of things I'm thinking about, like how can I facilitate so that everyone else has a much easier time working. And I think it does help, I think, always to have some kind of producer, facilitator role, that's somebody who maybe isn't directly kind of needing to answer production in the sense of like development or like creative deliverables, but their deliverable is just making sure the team is delivering.
Yeah, somebody sort of, you know, if you can imagine like the tribalism we were speaking to earlier, and the compartmental nature that happens like on a pipeline. Sometimes, like, you need somebody who's divorced from any of those individual roles, somebody who can take a look at the long view of the room and make decisions not based on what their immediate needs are or what's going to serve them best in the project, but what's going to serve the overall project best. And it's a tricky thing to understand. Even as like an experienced producer, you really do have to have a lot of conversations before you can make those kind of calls sometimes. But you. In my opinion, you know, if it isn't like a specific person who's playing the role of producer, the person who's on the box or sort of wearing dual hats has to be able to divorce themselves from their other hat in order to be a successful producer.
I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. So next speed round question. So David's asking, could you discuss the similarities or differences or workflow with creative technologists?
No.
And I'm smiling because I got a real good, I think my takes on creative technologists are publicly known. I think the most clicked on article we have on our blog is from like 2015 when I wrote why I hate creative technologists.
I don't hate anybody. I think, you know,
it wasn't a person, it was a concept of a role.
Yeah,
that I think was what I had beef with, and I still to this day have beef with it, but I find it's gotten a little bit better over the years. And I'll give my big take is, regardless of similarities, different workflow is, don't assume they know anything till they can show you that they know the thing. Because it's far too easy for someone to be creative technologist on a project, spend 10 minutes in the documentation of an API, go on this whole design of like, okay, this is how, you know, this whole project's going to work, talk to the API. but never go deep enough into the API to realize, oh wait, actually we can't do any of that because now that we've gone deeper into it, like it's not how it works.
Yeah,
that was my biggest gripe, was that the creative technologist was almost more. I just wanted them to change their job title name to something else, like prototyper, because it feels like creative technologists are given the executioner's role, but they're really not executioners in a lot of the sense. I find like they're more explorers, prototypers, people who like kind of testing and collaborating between different groups, almost maybe even touching on wearing the second hat of producer, versus like someone like me who really is like, I'm an executioner. Like you call me in to like
get into the trench,
get in there and like shovel the trench out for everyone coming behind you, right? Like, and that was my big gripe with creative technology. So that's you now. You to say, what's your vibe on creative?
The only thing, I'll just piggyback what you're saying a little bit, but by adding that, like, both of these roles that you're describing to me are valuable on a project, whether it's somebody who has that level of oversight or sort of overarching view of the project or where the creative on the project is going to go, versus the person who's in the trenches actually executing the thing that we've all been signed up for on the project. These are both valuable things to have. And
Adam P is personally attacked. He's feeling right now. No, don't worry, Adam. I love you, bro.
Yeah, we love you, Adam. It's nobody means to ever attack Adam P. That's for sure. But I see value in both things. You know, I think that it's important to have somebody who's sort of pushing creative in a sense, pushing what is capable. Because if we didn't continually push, you know, it would be very easy for us to become sort of satisfied with like what we've already done. We do need some that not to get too heavy about it. Have you ever seen the documentary that the TV show is based off of, Catfish? Have you ever seen it? You never seen that before? The documentary Catfish?
No. What is it based? What's the other part of it?
So I'll take a step back and I'll explain the premise to you. It's essentially about like one specific person in this documentary who was having sort of a relationship online, only to find out that the relationship they were having online wasn't a real person. Yes. Yeah, so like that expression, catfishing, comes from the TV show. Yeah. The TV show comes from this documentary that was made about the guy who hosts the TV show now, who had started a relationship with somebody online from, I forget exactly what the context was. There was something to do with exchanging paintings. He was a photographer. And it turns out that it wasn't, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it wasn't necessarily the person he thought he was talking to. And at the end of this documentary, again, this part I am going to ruin for everybody, they talk about where that expression comes from. And that is this idea that, like, when you're sending fish across the country, bear with me here, when you're sending cod across the country, cod are like a delicious fish, and a lot of people eat them. Not myself, not me personally.
Yeah. You don't like cod?
No, I'm not like a fish guy, even though I grew up by the beach. I like shrimp. Anyway, I'm getting away from a story that's already getting me away from a point, but let me get back on track here. Cod are like a very interesting fish in that, like, when you send them across the country, usually you do it by train, they will not like swim around. They will get like very like lazy, and they will get very fatty. And by the time they get to whatever location they're trying to get to, they probably aren't as good. You can't sell them for quite as much because they're so fatty. So what they do is place a couple catfish in those tanks. And the catfish don't hurt the cod. They don't like...
Catfish are crazy, I heard.
What they'll do is they'll go around and like annoy the cod a little bit to keep them moving, to keep them from getting too fatty. It's like this brilliant solution that somebody came up with using nature's inherent gifts. Put the catfish in with the cod, and the catfish keeps the cod sort of active and engaged. And that's what they're speaking to in the documentary, that sometimes you run into these people in your life that they keep you on your toes. They keep you from letting your guard down and exposing yourself, from getting too fatty of the brain, I guess. And I think that, like, not that I'm comparing, creatives to that, but I do think there's like a specific skill set that to the naked eye might seem like somebody can be asking too much or being too fickle about things. But the reality is that there's a lot of value to having that in a community. Somebody who's always trying to think about what isn't possible or what hasn't been achieved yet, or trying to push things further. It keeps us all on our toes. It keeps us all engaged in the work that we're doing. There is, very sincerely, like, there is value to that.
100%. And that's why I think that was my gripe with it, I would say like 5 years ago, was that I think people were still imagining that it was more of a finishing role and less of a design role, where I feel like lately it's gotten better, where people are realizing that's a member of the design team almost more than a member of like the straight up development team.
Yeah, I can see that. It's just worth always emphasizing, like, that team is everybody. We're all on that team together. You know what I mean?
That term is going to change based on who you ask. So.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I feel like that's probably true for a lot of us, right? All of our roles are kind of flexible when it gets down to it. Even when we're talking about up front, like, what is a producer? That's like one of the most obvious roles, but we still have a hard time defining exactly what it is. Yeah.
And Ben's saying it's a great doc. He made it on accident. It was supposed to be a documentary about finding love online.
Oh, really?
That's pretty funny, apparently. VJ Dr. Mojo is saying, so creative technologists are catfish?
I tried to walk myself back and say that wasn't what I meant, only to say that, like, there is a valuable role for everybody in society and on a project.
So here's a good one from Adrian, which is, what's the role of the producer in the hiring process? And I'm going to guess that's probably different on a per company basis. Yeah. In your experience, are like producers usually involved in the hiring process? I find most of the time it's mostly not producers involved in the hiring process.
So
it's kind of the trend I've seen.
For a lot of my career, I've been like what I think a lot of people describe as like a studio producer, meaning I didn't do a lot of the booking up front for my projects. I would have a scheduling team who would help me sort of fill in the blanks, and a lot of like the sort of paperwork, the bureaucracy of the hiring process was to be determined. Essentially, like, a person would have to hit a certain amount, like a certain threshold, before I would even be engaged in the conversation with them about coming on to the project. And at that stage,
interesting, yeah.
My involvement comes down to like making sure that they're a good fit on the team, and that's usually making sure that like conversations are being had with whoever's leading it creatively or whoever's going to be working alongside them. It's like, what I wouldn't want to have happen is like, we find a candidate who's completely capable, and then for whatever reason, like, we don't click. That's kind of besides the point, right? We want to make sure, it's preferred that everybody gets along on a project, but what's most important is that the team gets along and the team is able to sort of function completely. So for a lot of my career, I probably didn't get too involved, but certainly like now where I am in my career, I do like to know the people that I'm working with a lot more and get involved in that decision-making process a lot more. And I still leave a lot of like the intricacies of pipeline to the experts. I'm always leaning on the experts around me. But I do think like there's a place for my voice in the room too now at this stage in my career, that I can tell to a certain extent if somebody's going to be a good fit for a project, because I've been through a comparable project and I know what it's going to take and what I'm going to have to get out of that person to make it a success for everybody.
Yeah, you kind of have like a smell test now.
A little bit, yeah. But you get an instinct for it a little bit. And sometimes, you find yourself putting, trying to make it work for one reason or another, understanding that like it might not be a perfect fit, but how rarely do we ever get like perfect things in our lives? Sometimes you have to make compromises here or there, or change how you're approaching something based on the talent that you're able to find for something. It's like, look, you know this as well as probably anybody in the world out there. It's like what we do and what we work on is like a very very specific thing, and there isn't an unending pool of people that we can be dipping into at any given time to fill some of these roles. So we have to be have our finger on the pulse of the community. We have to have our finger on the pulse of where the community's going, and we need to be able to staff and build projects accordingly, because it's finite. It's all finite.
I think it's a great segue. I'm gonna real quick drop a quick little promo situation up in here.
Do it.
Now that we're talking about community and like the talent pool, let me tell you, if you're out in the chat and you're like, hey, you know what, like this touch designer thing sounds like real cool, and you're kind of getting into the interactive tech, immersive media industry, and you're like, I kind of don't know like where I'm going, what I'm doing. Let me tell you, we got a resource for you. It's, hold on, let me see if I can point to it. There it is. Da, 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 da. This is where the banana phone, like, ring, ring, this is opportunity calling, because the Interactive Immersive HQ, we have something called the HQ Pro, which I would consider probably the most comprehensive touch designer training operation out there at the moment. I'm going to put a link in the chat. I'm not going to really say more about it. There's a 7-day free trial you can check out. No commitments needed. Come join us. Say hi. Check out what we got to offer. If it's for you, cool, stick with it. If not, let us know. We still love you. I'm going to put a link in the chat now. You guys can figure it out from there. And that was the ring of opportunity there. Of banana-tunity, you know what I'm talking about?
I've seen you holding that banana phone for the last like 3 days straight, I think, and I've been waiting for the moment where it all came together, and here it is.
Yeah,
here it is.
Ring, ring, banana phone. So going into some, and folks, I do see all the questions. I'm catching up to them, so please bear with me as we get through them. And actually, Adam Pierce making a good point. You should always involve all major players that will work with that person when it comes to hiring. I think that's a great thing to do.
For sure, yeah. Those are the experts that I'm talking about, Adam. Like, I want to make sure that the people that are going to be actually working alongside them on a human level are comfortable working with them, and I want to make sure that I'm turning to the experts around me to make sure that like skill sets line up and things are going to go smoothly moving forward. For sure.
So we got Joaquin here with an interesting question, which I have, I think, an interesting take for, and I'd be curious to see what your take is. So Joaquin's question is, hi everyone, I am sure Leviathan is organized, but any advice on working with a team that doesn't have a good leader? And I can, while you're thinking, I can throw in my interesting take on it. I don't think there's such a thing as a good or bad leader. My hot take on this is that you are only a good leader up to a certain number of people. Then it just becomes too many people for you to lead.
And is so for like some people an example that number one,
That number is 1 for some people, exactly, right? Because I don't know anyone, and I shouldn't say I don't know anyone. There's lots of people who have like trouble just managing themselves. You got to do what you got to do, figure out kind of like how to like structure your life. That's always an evolving process. But I've never heard anyone say I'm a bad leader of myself really like deeply. It's usually like, oh, well, I'm doing okay, I'm developing, but this part could use some work, or this part could use some work.
I don't believe
and I've seen
Elders,
people.
I don't believe what you're saying, and I'm sorry to call you a liar.
The whole thing, whole thing, or just
specific part about
the specific part.
Maybe you've never heard anybody like outwardly say, I can't even manage myself. But I bet you felt that way before. I bet you felt like you haven't been a good advocate for yourself. Because I've certainly felt that way before. That I wasn't able, going back to like saying yes all the time. Like I wasn't able to like say no at the right time and protect myself in a way. So in that sense, like I felt like in that moment I wasn't even able to manage one. I wasn't even able to handle this guy.
Yeah. Let me say I guess what I mean is if you're looking at the big enough scale, to get through life, you have to manage yourself. And of course, there's going to be dips where like, oh God, I can't even get out of bed. This we've all been there. We've all had like highs and lows. But I think on the whole, like just living life is the act of managing yourself and kind of being your own leader throughout the day.
For sure.
To certain varying extents of efficiency, for sure. But, going back to the kind of like bigger picture, like I've seen people who are great leaders of 3 who are terrible leaders of 10.
Yeah.
I've seen people who are fantastic leaders of 100 who are terrible leaders of 5. So I think my hot take on that one is if there's no good leader for the whole troop, see if there's ways that the troops can self-organize into smaller groups that can self-lead, and then have ways that these groups are kind of talking to each other just on a regular basis. I think that would be like my strategy for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I agree with that. The only thing I would add is if we find ourselves in a situation, obviously we're never going to be able to control everything that everybody does. That goes for everyone. And if we find ourselves in a situation where things get out of control, that's or it feels like there's nobody sort of steering the ship, that's when we do need to be a bit protective and make sure that if nobody's looking after the big picture and you're not in a position where you can sort of slide into that role, make sure that you're setting an example for everybody else who's probably feeling very similar to the way that you're feeling. And that means being buttoned up. That means being productive on conversations and making sure that they're solution-based rather than focusing on problems or relitigating things that have already been discussed. Setting that example for everybody else. That's, you're never, like I said, you're never going to be in a situation where you can control the way that everybody behaves. But what you can do is be accountable for yourself and hope that the accountability that you're showing is contagious for the people around you. And I think that we're, for the most part, everybody that we work with are professionals, or at least they aim to be professionals. And I think that we can pick up on those sort of social cues that if we're buttoned up, then we have the expectation that the people around us should be just as buttoned up. And if not, then that's not a fault of us. We've done everything we can.
Yeah, and I think that feels like it's kind of, we're kind of talking about a little bit of the same like end result, which is that, in those situations where there is like no real like leading force, you do your best for yourself and hope that attitude is contagious or at least instructive and maybe motivational to other people. Like, hey man, like, yeah, let's pick it up. Let's get this. And there's always, the nice thing about let me tell you, the parachute in the room is that most gigs in our industry go real quick. So you won't be trapped for long. So,
yeah.
Try and make the best of it and, do your own best. And that's all you can do at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And, hope that other people see that.
Every project is a learning experience. We're going to have projects that go incredibly well. We're going to have projects that don't go as well as we wanted them to, or at least as well as we planned at the beginning. And I really can't say it enough that as long as we're taking things from those experiences and learning from them and implementing them into the next time we run into these situations, then they're not mistakes. They are growing experience. They are opportunities that we experienced together, we problem solved for together, and we took the lessons and applied them moving forward. So bad things are going to happen. Bad projects are going to happen. We do what we can on the day-to-day, but as long as we're growing, we're learning, we're doing our job.
And I would say, going back to that idea of self-managing, like, hey, listen, if you're having trouble, don't hesitate. Get a therapist, especially now in the times when we're isolated. Listen, I got a therapist. I'm no like, I'm no like perfect human either. I got to talk to somebody, get a professional. The same way if you need a touch designer thing, you get a touch designer like pro to kind of like help you deal with that.
Oh my God, 100%.
If you're having like a situation, like hit up a therapist. They're all doing like the online situation now with you set up a Zoom time, you do the thing, you PayPal them or whatever the coin, and they are the professional that's going to help you like deal with that. I think taking care of yourself is an important thing in our industry that is too often underlooked.
100% agree with you on that. We all need to be focused on making sure that we're well rested, we're well fed, and we're ready to tackle the next thing that comes up, the next opportunity that gets laid at our feet, because it's going to keep coming. So, the more we can be mindful and be taking care of ourselves, the better off we're going to be moving forward. I 100% agree with that. And part of it's like, if it's not a therapist, it's always it's talking to your family, it's talking to your friends, it's making sure, like I said earlier, that like we're diversifying our portfolio in life so that all of our joy, all of our pride, what makes us us isn't all coming from a single source, because like I said, we're going to be on projects that go bad, and it would be such a shame to be on a project that is struggling, and to feel like your entire life is falling apart because of it. And I've gone through that before. I've seen other people go through that before. And that's why I always tell people to diversify, try and find sources of happiness outside of your career, so that even when the project isn't working, you can find ways to keep yourself happy, motivated, and moving forward. Because to your point, Elbers, like, projects end, we move forward.
Yeah, 100%. So we got a good question from Niche_O here, who says, taking a deep breath for this one, it's a big sentence. I have 4 years as a UX architect / researcher role within the agency environment, mostly in the web design and app world. So I also design and do front-end development. At my current position, I have been slowly shifting into the role of creative technologist. and I've been taking interactive gigs using Touch Designer for the last year. I want to move into an agency similar to Leviathan as a producer. How do you think I position my experience as a positive in an interview?
I mean, just say exactly that.
That's great. I'm hired. Let's go. We're done here.
Yeah, I mean, how do I take my wealth of knowledge and use that to get a job? Well, that's how you get a job. Is you put yourself out there, whether it's Leviathan or it's another studio, and you explain to them exactly what you want, where you've been, and what you have on your tool belt that's going to help you get where you want to go. I hear that and I'm like, this is a person who's got a wealth of experience.
Like a sane human being.
Yeah, like I want to talk to this person and pick their brain as much as possible. So all I can say is like keep applying to stuff. Keep your eyes open for opportunities. Because I don't think there's a studio in the world that wouldn't hear that and be interested in engaging with this person and finding out what they're all about.
And I would even add to that, like, an interesting thing to think about is, unlike a lot of industries, in our industry, there aren't pure people that have purely come out of a training that purely trained them to do the thing. I know that was like the most confusing way I could have worded that, but only now. And when I say only now, I'm still saying, like, you can't go to school and get a 4-year touch designer degree. Like, you could maybe end up with like one course out of your 4 years that like touches touch designer, maybe, if you're lucky and you got like a really cool teacher who's kind of on the ball and trying to like prep you for some cool stuff.
But even then, the textbook was written like 3 years ago, and everything's out of date. No,
so
totally.
there is nobody in our industry who has purely come from a path that prepared them to do exactly the thing. So everyone, in fact, is in a similar position where, I have these skills from this industry, and I've been transitioning slowly and kind of building a varied set of skills, and I would like to land here because it's a cool place. I like the art, I like the work, the kind of stuff happening is cool, the vibe is cool. Like, that is how all of us kind of got here. So there's nothing, you're not the exception in this case where you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can get a job. Like my background is so varied and weird and not connected. That's the rule as far as I'm concerned. Like that's everybody is coming from a varied, diverse background. They're kind of excited to get into this. And exactly like Mike was saying, like, just the way that you kind of describe and talk about the stuff that you have done, the wealth of knowledge that you do have, how you'd like to apply some of that into this kind of new industry. That's the ticket to admission right there, and I don't think you have to kind of, distort your portfolio or work in any kind of weird way to make it seem like it's from another, like our industry, instead of just pure kind of UX architecture and research. Like, you can keep that stuff, like, look at that stuff as a bonus, not a negative.
100%, and that's exactly right. It is not a negative. It is a bonus as far as I'm concerned. I would say that, like, potentially you might want to think about the way that you're structuring not just like conversations, but also your resume to make sure you're highlighting the items that you feel like most accurately represent the job that you ultimately want to get. So if it's a job in production, it might be more so like highlighting roles that you've previously done or skills or experiences you have that make you a great producer, sort of putting those in the front of the conversation. But there is no reason you should shy away from sharing the wealth of information across other skills. I mean, what a bonus to have. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we said we were in the rapid fire, but
oh, I don't do rapid
now
fire.
We really have
sometimes,
to, yeah. I know. Now we gotta like get, because we got 10 minutes, and then we're gonna kind of like wind this down in that same time. But there are a bunch of questions. I have them here, folks. I know. Don't worry if they're like scrolling up, because I am watching. So let me just say, here it goes. Okay, so are you ready for rapid fire, Mike?
Hit me with
Real
it.
rapid fire.
This
was like, okay, so here we go. Have you had experience, this is from Johnny Monger saying, have you had experience with a team biting off more than they could chew? How do you get it under control and prevent it in the future? Go, give me the tweet version of that answer.
Take a step back and assess what our goals are. If they aren't aligned with what the clients are, then we have to have a larger conversation. If it's a matter of not setting the expectations with the client clearly, then that's a conversation that I need to have with them. and I'll look to my team to sort of inform how I have that conversation. But to me, it's about aligning in expectations, understanding what our budget is, and making sure that all the key stakeholders in that conversation are part of it and aware of where we are and where we need to go. I think, it's just going to come back to communication.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is naturally going to happen is you will find yourself biting off more than you could chew. That's really normal in our industry. Very rarely am I biting off way less than I could. Like, what's the opposite of biting off more than you could chew? Biting off enough that can fit in your mouth? Like, is that I don't think that's the expression, but that's like what I'll, like, very rarely are you doing that. And very regularly are you biting off more than you can chew. So I think the big thing for me is always self-reflection on planning strategies, on budgeting, because that's where it really hurts most. You know, if you bite off more than you could chew and you don't lose money and you deliver on time, then it's, maybe you'll end up tired and you need a little bit of a rest and relaxation after to kind of rejuvenate. But otherwise, I'd consider that wildly successful, maybe even, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's just making sure you don't go over budget, making sure you stay on schedule. Those are the big areas where I'm always looking at.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair to like kind of reflect on why you're doing a project. Is it to build a client relationship? Is it to achieve something creatively? Sometimes it's to make money? Like, let's be honest about it. Think about what the goal is, why you took this project on, and see if you're still executing to that. Because maybe you got away from it, or maybe you got away from some of the lesser goals, whether it's the creative or what have you. But maybe you're still executing for that larger goal, and that's something that we should be focused on.
And Adam Pierce trolling us saying, how do you schedule the unschedulable?
You don't.
That sounds like something a creative technologist will say, am I right?
You schedule, and then you reschedule, and then you reschedule it again. The
you
schedule is never done, my
until
friend.
People stop asking, and then it's finished. That's like that's the trick.
The question is the schedule done? No, it is a living, breathing document that we are constantly evolving.
And I would say one quick thing back to niche_o, who was asking about interviewing. A really big thing: have mock interviews with your friends. Have them like hop on the phone and just ask you a bunch of questions, and you kind of practice describing yourself, talking about your experiences. Like, that's a huge thing. I feel like a lot of people go into interviews completely. It's like the first time they're answering these questions.
So, and here's another, I'm going to piggyback that a little bit. Pick your friends that aren't in the industry. Pick people that don't know anything about what you're working with. And if you can explain it to them, if you can get them to understand what it is that you do in a concise, clear way, then you figured out how to go into that interview and maybe how to phrase some things so that whether it's somebody from the human resources department or an executive producer or whoever it is who maybe isn't necessarily on the front lines or familiar with the pipeline that you're typically working in, that you have some assurance that they'll understand what you're talking about as well.
Oh, I also, before I forget, actually, I think it was last month, we did our session with Matthew Reagan about hiring and hiring prep and interview prep. And actually, we had that whole thing where we had the call-in show, and I totally forgot until now. We had the call-in show. People were calling in. We were giving them mock interview questions. Okay, so hop on our YouTube. Go to listen. I don't know how to use YouTube. Go to where the recordings of the past live streams are. Well, first go to YouTube. Then you search for Interactive Immersive HQ. That's us. Oh, I pointed in the wrong direction. That's us. Oh, wait. Oh, God. There it is. That's the one. You look that up on the YouTube. You find us. You click it. Wherever the recordings of the live stuff is, you go in there. You find the one with me and Matthew, and that's the one. Like this, the instructions. So let's keep blasting these questions, and then we're wrapping this situation up. What do we got here? Let me see. Here's a good one for you, Mike. Are there any future goals for you professionally that you kind of have on the tip of your brain?
Oh my goodness, what a fun question to think about. Yeah, I mean, for me, like, where do I see myself going? Ultimately, I want to run a department. I like to work with people. I like to have conversations with people, and I like to work with different types of personalities. So I sort of see myself eventually sort of getting off of the front line of projects and the production side, and more so thinking holistically about how departments are run and how infrastructure happens. It's a long-term goal, I think, but ultimately, I think that's where I want to focus my energies. I do think of myself like primarily as like a people person and somebody who likes to have conversations, like I said, with different types of personalities and work with a lot of different types of people. So I think I'm well suited for it. It's a calling I have, I think.
I think that's a real wholesome. That's real nice.
Yeah, I don't. You know, it's.
I could see.
I'm so excited for all of the amazing stuff that I get to create or help create as a producer. It amazes me every time. I'm sure like everybody who works on these types of projects always has like a moment in the project where they recognize just like how incredible the work that they're doing is, and that happens to me so frequently, and so much of it still seems like magic, and I almost like never want to lose that. But yeah, I you know, ultimately, I want to think of I want to think big picture and spread that sort of enthusiasm to other producers.
I think that's a good thing, and I think it's actually something that a lot of like on the developer side, most developers don't, I think, take that time to look at the project and be like, wow, I like did that. So if you're a developer out there, hey, like take like 5 minutes near the end of the project and be like, man, look at this thing I just like we did. Wow. You know, pats on the back.
It's
claps,
easy. How easy is it to lose sight of that stuff in the midst of
a
project?
First like 6 years of my career was literally not ever thinking like, wow, good job on that. It was like, oh god, we finished that disaster, the next disaster, then the next is, you know. So that, you know, folks, you take a second, appreciate the work you're doing. We do have a quick comment here from Zager. I hope I'm saying the name correctly, my friend. As a producer, in my experience at creative and design agencies, producers do all the hiring, but it skews towards companies, not individuals. At companies that are, I think it's as companies that are more specialized in touch designer and creative tech, the engineering and content teams have preferred resources they go to when they need extra help. Okay, so I can see, yeah, in especially in our industry, since it's real small, like the word of mouth and, you know, folks that you know that like do really good work, they could definitely get pulled in.
Yeah, to me that like chip of it's almost like one factor in sort of a larger algorithm that happens, right? It's the comfort level that a team might have working with somebody. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the best fit for the project, but to that person's point, like that might be a big indicator that they ultimately might not be perfect, but the right person for the role.
Mm. And we've got two final questions. I guess three questions. They're all kind of similar. Steve was asking, how exactly are you becoming aware of the talent pool? Where are interactive designers putting their portfolios? And Steve was also mentioning, as someone who might want to hire, is the Interactive Immersive HQ job form also behind the HQ Pro paywall? And the third question, which is similar, from David, and where can we find jobs? Plus the Interactive Immersive HQ jobs form here. Yo, let me tell you. So you know, this is the last like banana phone situation before we kind of tag off here. If you're new to this kind of HQ situation and you haven't been shilled all of the things we shill on a regular basis, we're good about our shilling, folks. Let me tell you. You probably get shilled way harder by other people. And we give you so much free stuff. Like, I get to shill a little bit every once in a while. We have a brand new job platform, job site that we put together specifically for our industry. We released it, I think, just about a month ago. It is really modern, feels really nice. Tons of companies are out there posting their jobs all across Touch Designer, Unity, Unreal, Open Frameworks, kind of across our industry, to really try and make this like a go-to place for all you folks that are out there looking for gigs. You can rest assured that the big majority of them are here. And actually, I'm always surprised by how many jobs are, you know, even though we're talking about all this stuff like COVID closing this, COVID closing that, there's still a lot of work out there. So I highly encourage people to check it out. I'm going to put a link in the chat. And then just to mention on top of that to the other questions, it's actually free. It's free to use. So if you're looking for a gig, it's free. Hop on there, look around, check out all the jobs, all the ways you can apply for them are all there. Go to town. If you're looking to hire somebody, you can post a job for free. You can even go on there, and if you go to the top and hit view professional profiles, you can see that's where then we start to get into like the fancy features that the HQ Pro members get, which is that HQ Pro members can now host these really like dope profiles on there talking about their experience. It's almost like LinkedIn minus all of LinkedIn's BS shenanigans. Think about it like that. So it's super cool. Highly recommend getting in there. But even if you don't, by all means, it's free. Hop in there, take a look, make sure you're getting the work that you need to get. And with that said, did you know it's perfect timing? It's 2. I finally caught up with all the questions in the chat. and we've come to this like beautiful kind of like, you know, opening in the woods situation. So first and foremost, thanks all the chat for kind of giving us a lot of fun stuff to talk about. It's been really fun to kind of talk about these things. And thank you, Mike, for joining us. I know you always have a lot of stuff going on, and you know, I think people in the chat don't realize taking 2.5 hours out of another human's day is a big ask, and I appreciate it. And I'll say thanks on behalf of the chat and on behalf of the community for taking the time to kind of dive into a lot of these questions with us.
Oh, thank you, Elvis, for having me on the show, and thanks to the community for the great questions. This was a lot of fun for me. This is, to your point, I'm on a lot of calls and doing a lot of things all day. This is certainly one of the most fun ones I've gotten to do all week. So thank you so much, man.
No problem. And is there anything that you kind of want to leave your last kind of? I was about to say your dying legacy, but like that's going back to like me saying I love you to your sister. Like it's not this. Those are the thoughts that are supposed to be filtered to like don't that one, you know, your dying legacy. Anyways, you know, your final thoughts for the stream.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to leave folks with?
The best advice I could give anybody anytime as it pertains to like work or the work that we do, always just try to be the kind of person that you want to work with. And I don't have a good answer for what that means for an individual person, but it's food for thought, and it's something to think about. If it feels like the people around you aren't hitting your standard, maybe it's a reflection more than a picture that you're being painted.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's deep. And I guess I would just tag on with that. People, take care of yourselves. Crazy world out there. Make sure your self-care is part of your routine. Exercise. You need someone to talk to. Therapists are good. Friends and family are good. Eat on a regular schedule.
Call us. Jump on the phone with us. We'll chat.
Yeah, you know, call. I mean, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, call me. It's fine. I'll make time. I always make time. Community knows that. So with that said, thank you everybody for watching. Recording of this, as always, will be put up on YouTube. It'll be on Twitch. I think Twitch keeps them for about 60 days. And I can't thank our guest, Mike Pullan, Senior Creative Producer at Leviathan, enough for taking the time to talk to us. So with that said, folks, remember, so I should say real quick, right quick, bloimy, as my friends in the UK would say, bloimy. You remember the schedule. It's supposed to be the second Friday of every month. I know this is one Friday behind just because, you know, we're a little bit busy on the front end. So, you know, remember, check that inbox. The next live stream will be February 12. Same bat time, same bat channel. And with that said, thank you everybody for joining us. We will see you then.